Okay, so we're going to do a quick little discussion here on finding ransomware to close things out, and then hopefully my video will work. You know, try to avoid demo problems, but then there's always video problems. Okay, so finding ransomware, practical solutions. Okay, so ransomware, as anybody who's suffered through a ransomware attack, is very time-consuming and expensive to remediate. For most organizations, statistically, takes about 30 days, and it costs about $1.8 million to fully remediate the incident. Statistically, right now, an organization is compromised by ransomware every 11 seconds. Takes about 30 days to do a remediation, and then 92% of people don't get back all their data even after they pay the ransom. So there's a lot of problems around that. So we're trying to figure out ways of combating this, and then that's kind of what we're going to address here. So ransomware actors, why are they so successful? Some of the reasons is because they're now considered the professional business. So they're actually have a business model. They have revenue streams. I mean, they have affiliates. It's a full economy. The ransomware actors are very highly skilled. Usually employed like, you know, engineers as skilled as any high-tech organization that's like legitimate. They're very highly motivated to make money. So they're out there looking for people to attack. They have deep pockets. Sometimes there's criminal organizations that invest money just like as in the startup. So they have financial backing. And also they have they're sometimes protected by governments. They're protected by criminal organizations. So they're sometimes even protected against like international law enforcement. So that's some of the reason why they're becoming so successful. So what we want to understand is are existing protections adequate? And with all the successful attacks, it doesn't seem to be the case. The existing protections against ransomware firewalls. There's EDR to protect your endpoints. Segmentation, security enclaves for like PCI. Patching, monitoring, backups. I mean, these are things that you need to have in place, but for some reason they don't seem to be enough. And why is that? So you've got these things called security enclaves. A lot of people say, well, I have my PCI zone, it's locked down. Nobody's going to get in there. We audit it constantly, we're always paying a lot of money to audit it. People coming in, we passed the PCI exam, all this stuff. The problem is, often there is an external network which is not protected, where it's not hardened as well. It's not regularly audited, and there's often connections between these two. And so the attackers are not going to go into your PCI zone or your private locked off network. They're going to go against the low-hanging fruit, which is generally the business operation networks. And even if you look at some of the recent attacks, it's generally through these business operation, remote access type general purpose services, where the exposures are coming through. So what's the typical attack path? And doing some analysis of hello?
Yeah, we can hear you, Larry.
Okay, I thought you said something.
No, we didn't say.
Okay, so what's the attack path, right? So generally the attack path is phishing or dumped credentials. Seems to be like, I've done some research on the different types of exposures, and these seem to be the consistent attack paths. Phishing comes in through Word documents, links, things like HTA links, Excel macros. The user clicks on it and gets ransomware installed, and then they proceed with the attack. Apparently, a lot of ransomware attacks are used by stolen or old credentials that are online and on like Pastebin or dark web and things like that. And so that's something to be concerned about. Actually, do you have old accounts out there that you may not know about, like on VPNs and remote access servers and stuff like that? That you know the credentials may be online for those. So basically, once the attack is successful and they have a beachhead, then a lot of times now the actors are using humans, just like in a pen test. They get into your network through this piece of software. You know, if they use a stolen credential, they'll log in and then they'll run their malware, and then they'll go and analyze your environment. Some of the things that they do, everything we do on a pen test, they look for your documents, just for passwords that might be documented somewhere. They do password spraying on your internal environment, see if they can compromise more accounts. They do a thing called Kerberoasting, which is trying to find service accounts with weak passwords. They exfiltrate data. They post data online. And the attackers are using just common techniques which are already documented. Nothing even fancy. And like some of these attackers will have a little profile on that. All documented on sites such as Atomic Red Team, the MITRE attack framework. They're just using stuff straight out of there. So what are the types of ransomware here? So ransomware has shifted a bit, but the basic structure of ransomware is, and in its initial form was hard drive encryption. So it would encrypt your whole hard drive, and then you would have to get a key to decrypt the hard drive. But now they're doing it. They're a little more sophisticated. They're selectively encrypting files, you know, they're looking for certain types of files and then selectively encrypting them. And then there's the newer type of ransomware is the data exfiltration with threat of public release. And this is getting fairly notorious. It's a little bit harder to protect against than the traditional file encryption. Yeah, and then also it's used to cloak state actors or cloaking themselves under ransomware gangs. They say, well, you know, they come in, they attack you, steal data, and they're not there in it for the ransom. They're in it to steal the data, you know, steal intellectual property, still, you know, monitor what's going on in an organization. And then they say, oh well, it was just a ransomware attack. It wasn't. It was this group of people instead of actually had a state motivation. So it's a little bit about a recent attack that everybody's probably familiar with. Probably more if you're on the East Coast. So this was the Colonial pipeline attack, perpetrated by a dark side group. It shut down a pipeline that, just for instance, covers the entire eastern seaboard as far north as New York, as well as the southern states. It caused a major disruption, fuel shortages around the whole region, sharp rise in gas prices. I think in Virginia, the gas was for a few days almost $8 a gallon. And then even the airlines had trouble getting fuel for a little while. And if you look at the analysis, a couple of companies have done the analysis. They just basically used the tried and true Windows attack methodology. And interesting to note is the attack came in by a known username and password by an old VPN account. So they didn't even have, there's no malware. I mean, there was no phishing at all. Literally, they went on the dark web, they found a username and password, and they used that to get in. So that's kind of interesting. And then, you know, the sort of the impact of that was Colonial paid 4.4 million in Bitcoin in ransom. I think the FBI got some of that back, but initially Colonial did pay $4.4 million in Bitcoin ransom, which is pretty normal amount these days for the ransom. Yeah, so like I said, they used an old VPN password from a password dump. I think the company that did the analysis, Mandiant, they also discovered this password inside. This was reported on by Bloomberg. They discovered this account inside a batch of leaked passwords on the dark web. There was no evidence of phishing, and they were able to get into the network and basically stole all the data from the SCADA info servers, and then
Nope.
all the main
Yeah,
operation.
I mean, wait a minute. I can call you later. You okay?
I think somebody needs to be unmuted, please.
Got it. Okay.
We can hear
Thanks.
you.
Bye.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. Anyway, so the info servers that controlled and did reporting on their SCADA, your management operations network were infiltrated, and everything was encrypted just from a leaked VPN password. So just goes back to the whole password spraying, the whole password recycling, strong password. It's kind of reinforces the whole password issue, and the need for discipline there. So what does this thing do? It deletes. So this payload apparently it was run by the user who logged in by this leaked VPN password. So the dark side people just logged in via this VPN account.
I think we lost you, Larry. There, are you still there?
And then they just went using a hello.
Yeah, so we lost you for a few seconds.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so what does yeah, my internet connection is unstable. I wonder why. The malware wipes the recycle bin and deletes the shadow copies. I don't know if people are aware, but when Windows file system writes data, it has a backup copy of the data within the file system, so it's for recovery. So this actually goes out and deletes all that stuff, so that once you lose access to your data via the encryption, you can't actually just go use the shadow copy or the recycle bin to recover stuff. It kills targeted Windows services to release file handles so that they can encrypt everything. It also terminates certain processes that may be protecting these files. It recursively encrypts files until local network shares have been encrypted. And then the file name, file data, and the victim hash are appended to each file before it is exfiltrated to the attacker's preferred C2 server. So that's basically how this thing works. This is a basic attack flow of what it does. The details of it. We'll make this presentation available for people who want to go through this. But this is everything that this malware does before it encrypts everything and sends it off to the back end, to their back end. So you can see that's fairly sophisticated. And does a pretty good job of stealing stuff and making sure you can't recover it easily. And also, notice it doesn't mess with Russian computers. So I thought that was an interesting. If it's a Russian Windows, it exits, right? Or if you don't have enough space for it to encrypt everything, it exits as well. It also deletes itself when it's done, so you can't. It's hard to recover. Okay, so what's the consequences? They can threaten to release the data. That's becoming more and more common. And then sometimes this release data can be harmful. Let's say like some police organizations who were hit by ransom recently, and the names of police, their home address, all kinds of personal information, like any type of things in their history, personnel file, all of that kind of stuff is can be released. So it has some consequences, to harm people directly rather than just corporate data. And then what are problems currently? And this is one reason why it's become so successful. EDR and firewalls commonly fail. They don't have the proper signatures. They can't detect the traffic properly. The backups aren't really designed to protect against cybercrime. Backups are more for data corruption. There's backup window issues. Yeah, it's like sometimes the file or the backups have corruption in them. You have to be tested. They have to be tested regularly. Can take a long time for large, multi-terabyte file systems and databases. It could take hours. They can target certain backup systems to disable them. Backup poisoning. They basically install malware. And they install the malware, and they don't actually perform the attack until the backup copies the stuff and saves it. And so what happens is even if you get hit, when you restore everything, it's going to restore the malware back because you've saved it. So that's another thing that's happening. And then, less than 10% of organizations test backups monthly. So patching and monitoring is often incomplete and not timely. And then the attackers are slow and careful. So these are some of the things that's enabling ransomware and some of these problems right here. So the thing is don't focus on just one product. Have a holistic viewpoint. Have like some endpoint security. Have SIEM, network monitoring, sandboxing, internal segmentation. So you want to have sort of a holistic type of a security program, and then just having a single point solution is not enough anymore. And I think we've been trying to drill that for a while now. That people need to take it. There's a broad holistic approach. Some of the things you can do to help is doing system audits. And there's actually, like I mentioned before, there's the Bloodhound tool, which also has an Azure collector now. And there's also a module that can be used with called Plumhound. And what it does is it actually takes your Bloodhound data that you collect, and it actually creates a remediation checklist. So you can go and say, okay, well, these are the problems in my Windows environment. These are my permissions problems. These are some of my policy problems. These are some of my exposures, my domain admin exposures. Provides some checklists and some remediation advice, which is very nice. So another thing that's becoming more and more common is canaries, that are basically fake accounts, both in AD and in accounts that are service accounts. And then honey files are basically files that are open, set off alerts. This is because what the attackers will do is they're going to be opening up and sifting through your data to see what's important to steal. And so these files should never be opened by normal users or service processes. So if they are, there's a way to track the attackers. You want to limit the attack window. You want to emulate attackers. You want to know, like we talked about it, the atomic red team type stuff. You want to make sure that, like the internal pen tests we do, we want to make sure you have attackers you're controlling in your environment, so that you have a knowledge of what they do. You want to trace egress points where your data might be leaking. You want to engage user awareness training, and you want to be prepared to have a plan in place for ransomware negotiation in case you do get hit. So there's some enhanced capabilities you want your internal security team to have: multi-layer security, overlapping tools. There's Microsoft has something called watch folders. You may want to implement that, so you could monitor certain critical folders. And I think with watch folders, you can even detect certain types of encryption. there's also some software work prototyping, which I'm going to try to do a demo of in a little bit. And then Racine, which is an interesting open source tool, which monitors your volume shadow copies. So if something starts deleting your volume shadow copy, it will alert you. So that's an interesting little tool to be aware of. So now I'm going to try to run this presentation. It's kind of like a quick little demo of a tool we're working on. We're doing some POCs on. It's like a real-time data file system where you could store critical data, and it monitors that as a file system driver. So if anything starts encrypting stuff, it can either block it or it can restore things in a matter of seconds, and no matter how badly the data is destroyed or encrypted, etc. And then also it has some, actually I don't think it's in this video, but it has some built-in honey file capability where it generates honey files automatically into the data based on the data you insert into it. And if those files are open, then it pretty much prevents that particular data connection to copy anymore. It slows the data connection down to a crawl so that the attacker can't do anything anymore. So just kind of the interesting features that we're going to be testing. Okay, let me see if I can run this demo, and then that's pretty much it. Let's see here. The demo. Okay. All right, so this is the demo. Let's see here if I can make this bigger. So I think it's about 10 minutes. So I'm just gonna let it run. So this thing is actually it's implemented in this particular demo as an SMB share. So the file, all the data is on this SMB share, which is shared to this Windows 10 environment. And then yeah, these are the files. It's a network share. This software is running integrated with the Samba network share. So that's the file that we just looked at on this shared file system that's shared to this workstation. There it is. This is being shared over SMB to this workstation. Okay, so this script here is going to I believe it's going to encrypt all the files under that documents folder. So it's encrypting all the data in there. So it's still in the process of encrypting. Yeah, it looks like it's still going on down there. Hopefully, we'll see some of these documents. Okay, so I think these are still encrypting. Okay, so after the files have been encrypted, um, you could actually recover them and by listing these things called restore points, and these are actual changes and transient changes in the data over time. And you can, as the file has changed, it creates a sort of a data element, a data point for each change in the file, and then you can actually go back and recover it. This is done at the file system level, independent of anything actually interacting with the file. So what's happening here right now is this documents directory has been fully encrypted by the ransomware, and this is going to this tool is going to restore the data to a certain point in time, and then these are all the different points in time you can restore data to. And this transaction log of the changes in data is happens independently of like I said, the encryption, and can be stored remotely and it's protected from being changed also even if it's stored on the same machine. So this is actually restoring back the data that was in that documents directory before it was encrypted. So initially what we saw was all the data in the directory getting encrypted by that script, and then we came to the transaction log, and then we just ran the restore command, and then it picked a certain time, and then it just automatically recovered the data. This is again that folder which was originally encrypted, and then that's that file, and that's the original file before it was changed. That's just one of the changes in the file that it recovered too, even though it was changed. So if the file is damaged, changed, or encrypted, it's can recover it instantaneously. All right, it's basically here. It's making the memory, the data memory available for that particular point in time, so that it can be recovered. Okay, I think that's the original file. Right, so that was the original file that was it was encrypted, and then that we changed. See how much is left on this video. It's almost done. Anyway, so just this is kind of the POC we're working on. So the idea here is to use this file system to put some of your more critical data on, and that you share, especially through stuff like file shares, any type of databases, that kind of stuff. And then if that critical data does get hit by a ransomware attack, you can basically recover all the data instantaneously without having to worry about any downtime or backups or paying ransoms and things like that. So yeah, that's basically what this demo was. So kind of still a little bit early stages. That's why we're POCing it. But anybody who wants to participate in that would definitely be interested in talking to people who want to be part of a POC of instantaneous data recovery solution to protect yourself against ransomware. Anyway, that's it. That's all I got.
Thank you, Larry, for your time. if you want to share your screen. So this brings us to the conclusion of today's webinar. Just a reminder, please visit our information security website, Security Center, cccSecurityCenter.org. Check out all the services we offer, such as SSL cert, phishing assessments, pen testing, and some other stuff, exciting things we have there. And if you are interested, please, you can, request a new thing that you're interested in, and it comes to us, and then we'll get in touch with you to onboard you on the thing that you might be interested in. So having said that, if there's no further questions, thank you very much for everyone to join. These materials, all the recording and the materials will be available shortly, and there will be a communication related to this, the presentation and recording, and it will be emailed to everyone. So yeah, and then so thanks again very much. We appreciate your patience, and hopefully this helps a lot all the community colleges in strengthening their security posture. Have a great day. Thank you.
Larry, could I ask you a question?
Oh, yeah. I had a question.
Racine, have you actually seen anyone use it in production in the community college system, or
Have I seen any of what?
Racine users?
I have
Racine
not.
campuses.
I just came across this recently, and so I wanted to at least make people aware of it.
Oh no, it's great, especially for Outbreak. It's really great.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't use it here, but
it?
I've only played with
Okay.
it, and I've researched it, but I one of the questions in one of the discords I'm on was really just, is any production business using this as a normal day-to-day?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, like I said, we're going to be doing some, ransomware type POCs. We can make the Racine thing a part of that. And anybody wants to do kind of participate some cutting edge, anti-ransomware sort of capability. Yeah, let us know, because we want to put together sort of like a set of colleges that are focused on, having an environment that's pretty ransomware proof, at least for certain more critical data and systems.
That sounds great.
Right. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks. Have a good day.